Hi everyone, my name is Megan. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make my own homemade lard soap. Now I've been rendering my own lard for a lot of years now. I used to do it with my mom, so I love using lard. And last year I realized that you can make soap out of lard because you use different oils and fats to make soaps. And I really loved my lard soap. And I really like that it is like very self-sustaining, and like you raise the pigs, you harvest the fat, you render the lard, and you make soap with it. Like you can make this like so totally from scratch. It's just crazy. And I really love being able to do that with things. So lard soap is definitely one of my favorites. When I first started making soap, it was a little intimidating because the lye is a little scary, but I've been making soap for like 2 years now, and it is a piece of cake. It's really not as scary as you might think, as long as you're careful with the lye, and it just goes smoothly every time. I've never had an issue with it doing anything bad, and so let's get right into this video. I have all my supplies gathered around me here, so I'm just going to show you everything you need to make this. I have my recipe here. I actually used the Soap Calc website to calculate how much lard versus water versus lye that I'll need. So if you go on there and you can put in all the fats and oils that you want to use for your soap, and it'll tell you how much lye and water to use with that amount of fat. So I really love that website, and it just makes it really nice. It actually even shows like the hardness of the bar, the cleansing, the conditioning, bubbly, creamy, iodine. So I've got my lard here. This is actually some lard that got a little bit browned too much. As you can tell, it's usually like bright white. And so since I'm only using this for soap and not for cooking or baking, I use the worst jar of my lard from each batch to make soap. So that's what this jar is. I have some filtered water here. We're on city water, so I filter all my water that I use for soap, just because I don't want any extra things affecting how the lye works and all of that. I have my lye here. I get this lye from Bulk Apothecary. I'll link all this stuff that I can find in the description box below, but Bulk Apothecary has some really high quality lye, and it's the best price that I found anywhere else, so I'm really happy with their lye. I have a scale to measure out all the ingredients. I have a stack of soap molds. These are just silicone molds. They're nice and like easy to bend, so you can just like pop the bar out, which makes it really easy. When I first started making soap, I used glass bread pans, and it made it kind of difficult because you had to like cut it, and after it gets too hardened, it's like close to impossible to get it out of something that's as hard as glass. So I love my silicone molds. I have a pot to melt the lard in and a spoon to scoop it out of the jar. And then lastly, I have my huge crock pot that I use for soap making. I actually have this crock pot totally dedicated to only soap making, just because if it only has soap, I don't have to wash it out every time afterwards, so it's got kind of some soap residue, and I don't want any soap to get in our food. I'm just a little bit freaked out about that, so it's actually been working really well. It's saving me a ton of time to only have one crock pot for soap, so then it's just got soap on it all the time, and I don't have to clean it too often. But today we are making hot process soap, so you need a crock pot to cook it in. I just use this 4-cup Pyrex measuring thing for measuring out the water in, and then just a bowl and a spoon. I just weigh my lye into this, and then it gets poured into the Pyrex thing with the water to combine the lye and the water. So now we're gonna start measuring stuff out. I'm gonna get my scale here and put the pot on it and turn it on. Make sure it's tared out to 0. So we're gonna do 30 ounces of the lard. And I've had this out at room temperature, so it's really nice and easy to pour. And I just wanted to mention that the reason I use a scale and weigh it in ounces is you can be a lot more accurate with it than if you're just measuring it in cups. And with soap, you want to be pretty accurate with your measurements. So that's about 20 ounces with that one partial jar. So I'm gonna open up my next jar and use a little bit out of this. So here we have all of our lard measured out. I'm gonna take this over to the stove and melt it till it's a clear liquid. I just have it on low because you wanna be careful not to get it too hot. I've learned this the hard way. You just want it to the point where it's melted and clear, but not boiling. Because if you get it too hot, I found that once you get everything combined in your crock pot, it's really likely to like really expand a lot and like go out of the sides, and it makes a humongous mess. So just be really careful not to heat it up too much. So now I'm gonna do my filtered water, and I'm gonna measure out 11.4 ounces. I'm gonna set that aside. And now we'll do our lye, and we're gonna do 4.02 ounces of lye. I got too much. That happens a lot of times, and it's pretty irritating. I'm just gonna take my spoon and scoop some back in here. It's not the end of the world. So now we need to combine the lye and the water. And I'm gonna take this outside and do it there. So here's where a lot of people are kind of scared of making soap, is because if you want to dump the lye into the water and not the water into the lye, because if you dump the water into the lye, and it could explode, and that would be really bad. So you want to make sure you dump the lye into the water. You want to do it outside where there's plenty of airflow. You don't want to do it inside, because if you breathe it in, it can be bad for your lungs, and it's really not pleasant to breathe in regardless. So you can do it in the house. I would just recommend like opening some windows and maybe even using a respirator, but it's easy enough to do outside. And make sure I put it somewhere where our cats and our dog can't get to it, because that would be really bad if they drink it. And then it's also preferable to use a glove on the hand that you're stirring it with, just so that it doesn't splash on your skin. I'm usually pretty careful with it, and I don't wear a glove, and I have white vinegar on hand in case it does get on my skin, because the way to deactivate lye, if it gets on you, you pour some white vinegar on it and it deactivates it, so it'll stop burning your skin. But in general, you just want to be really careful with it so that it doesn't get the chance to get on your skin. So normally when I'm stirring it up, I have it like way away from me, and I stir it really carefully, sometimes with a glove, and I make sure I'm like turned away from it so that I don't breathe it in. I get it stirred up, and then I go away before it gets too fumy, and I go back inside and I wait for it to dissolve in it until the water's a lot clearer. And then when you're first putting it in there and stirring it, you want to make sure you stir it up really well so that the lye doesn't start to stick to the bottom, because once it sticks to the bottom, it can be a little bit difficult to get off. So now we have our melted lard here and our lye and water combined together. You can see that this liquid is a lot more clear. It's not totally clear, it's still a little bit foggy, but it's definitely way more than when we first combined it. So these are ready to go. The other thing that I forgot to mention that you would need is a stick blender. And this is super, super important. You can just stir the soap until it comes to trace, but it takes forever. So one of these is really, really important. So first I'm gonna pour my lard into the crock pot. And then I'm gonna pour my lye and water mixture. And I pour it over the back of the spoon sometimes so that it doesn't splash too much. And then the next step is to use our stick blender and to blend this until it comes to trace. Right now it's like super liquidy, and so I'm gonna blend it until it becomes a lot thicker, more like pudding. So I'll show you what I mean when we get there. So now you can see this is a lot thicker. The way I tell is when I pull this up and pull it across, if it leaves a mark like that. So this is like pudding right now. So now that's called coming to trace. So now it's ready to start cooking. I've noticed that some soaps come to trace a lot faster. Like this lard soap definitely comes to trace a lot faster than my coconut oil soaps. Now I'm going to put this on low, and then I come over here to our other timer, and I'm gonna set this for 45 minutes. I just put the lid on this, and I'm going to just let it cook for 45 minutes, and I'll see you then. Usually while the soap is cooking, I deal with all the dirty dishes, and the way I clean these to deactivate the lye is I fill this whole thing up with water, and I put a little splash of white vinegar in it, and I let it soak for a while, and then I wash them out like regular with some soapy water. This has gone 45 minutes now. You can see it looks a lot different than when we started. It goes through several stages when it's cooking. It kind of poofs up and then comes over and sinks back into the middle, and then it kind of settles down and looks like this. So this lard soap is quite a bit more runny than some of my other soaps when it's cooked like this, but that's fine, it'll harden once we start putting it in the molds. So now we have to make sure that it's done. A lot of people use pH strips and stuff to get it like super precise, but I've never used pH strips. I just use what's called the Zap test. And you just get a little bit on your spoon, and I'm gonna let it cool a little bit so I don't burn myself. And then you touch it to your tongue, and if it zaps you, it means the lye hasn't deactivated yet and you need to cook a little longer. If it just tastes bad like soap, then it means it's done cooking. So yep, that just tastes like soap, so it's all done. It's not the most pleasant way to tell if it's done, but I'd rather do that than order pH strips. At this point, you can add any essential oils or herbs that you want to. I just leave my lard soap plain, and so I'm just gonna move on to the next step, which is scooping into the molds. Now that they're all in the molds, all that's left to do is to let them harden for at least an hour. I will probably let these harden overnight because I'm not in desperate need of soap, but at least let them harden for an hour. This is why I love hot process soap so much, because you can use it like almost right away. And with cold process, you have to let it cure for like 12 weeks or something ridiculous. So I got 12 and like a half bars from that. Here's a bar from the last batch, and you can kind of see what it'll look like. They'll get a lot whiter. As they harden, they kind of lighten in color and they get really firm. One thing I want to mention is that you can use this like really soon after, but the longer you let them sit and harden, the longer they'll last while you're using them. I don't know the exact conversion, but I just know that the harder the bar is, the longer it will last you. So I like to make sure I make this in plenty of time before I need it so that I can let them sit for plenty of time. And then after they all harden, I like to put all my labels on them. I don't put them on the ones that we're gonna use for ourselves, but any ones that I'm gonna sell, I label right away so that I don't have to do it later. And I think that is all for this video. If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer any. I really hope you enjoyed this video and it was helpful, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.